What does a legend see that everyone else misses? When the cameras are focused on the scoreboard, when the analysts are debating spring training statistics, when the entire baseball world is still making up its mind about whether Roki Sasaki is ready for this moment, a legend watches the details nobody else is watching. And what that legend found in Roki Sasaki's first appearance of the season has completely rewritten every evaluation, every prediction, and every cautious assessment that came out of spring training. 1 run. 5 innings. A tenacious performance that didn't just silence the doubters. It made them look like they were watching a completely different pitcher. In professional baseball, first appearances carry a specific kind of gravity that statistics alone cannot measure. Every player who has ever made the transition from one league to another, from one country to another, from one set of expectations to an entirely new and vastly more demanding one, understands this gravity intimately. It is not simply about performance. It is about proof. It is about the moment when everything that was theoretical, the scouting reports, the projections, the comparisons, the carefully worded assessments from front office personnel who watched you throw in a controlled environment, becomes real in a way that cannot be walked back or reframed. You either show up in that moment, or you don't. Roki Sasaki showed up. And the legend watching from his seat, a man who spent his own career navigating exactly this kind of pressure, exactly this kind of transition, exactly this kind of first appearance that the entire sport was watching with held breath, saw something in those 5 innings that the box score could not fully capture. He saw the real Roki Sasaki. And he was not surprised by what he found. Spring training evaluations are a necessary part of baseball's annual rhythm. Teams need to assess. Coaches need to observe. Front offices need information. The media needs storylines. But spring training evaluations have a fundamental limitation that experienced players and analysts understand deeply, even when they are reluctant to say it publicly. They are not the real game. The intensity is different. The stakes are different. The preparation on both sides of the matchup is different. Pitchers are often working on mechanics rather than results. Hitters are timing up rather than competing. The entire ecosystem of a spring training game operates at a frequency that is genuinely distinct from the frequency of a regular season contest where every pitch has weight and every out has consequence. Roki Sasaki's spring training appearances generated the kind of mixed assessments that were perhaps inevitable given the context. There were moments of brilliance, the kind of stuff that reminded everyone watching why the Dodgers had pursued him with such determination. And there were moments that created questions. Walks that suggested command issues. Pitch counts that climbed faster than ideal. Innings that felt more labored than a pitcher of his caliber should perhaps look. The evaluations that came out of those appearances were cautious. Measured. Full of the careful hedging language that analysts use when they are not entirely sure what they are seeing and do not want to overcommit to a narrative that the regular season might immediately contradict. Roki Sasaki is still developing his command in this league. Roki Sasaki is adjusting to the new environment. Roki Sasaki will need time. 5 innings. 1 run. The legend watching from his seat had a different message entirely. Not every voice in baseball analysis carries equal weight. There are analysts who are deeply knowledgeable about statistics, about trends, about the mathematical frameworks that have transformed how the sport evaluates talent and projects performance. Their work is genuinely valuable. The sport is better for the precision they have brought to evaluation processes that used to rely almost entirely on subjective observation. But there is another category of voice entirely. The voice of someone who stood on the same mound. Who faced the same pressure. Who made the same transition from a place where they were already great to a place where they had to prove it all over again from the beginning. The legend who offered the thorough analysis of Sasaki's first appearance belongs to this second category. His assessment did not begin with exit velocity or spin rate or whiff percentage. It began with something harder to measure and more important to understand. It began with how Sasaki carried himself when the game was not going exactly as planned. Because any pitcher can look dominant when every pitch is landing exactly where he wants it. The question that separates good pitchers from great ones, the question that scouts and coaches and thoughtful analysts have always known is the real question, is what a pitcher does when things get difficult. When a runner reaches base in a tight situation. When the count runs full and the game is on the line and the hitter is ready and the crowd is loud and the margin for error has shrunk to almost nothing. In that moment, who are you? The legend watched Roki Sasaki answer that question in the first real game of his American career. And the answer impressed him deeply. The word tenacious is not an accident. It was chosen deliberately by the people who watched Sasaki work through 5 innings of his first appearance, and it carries a specific meaning in the vocabulary of pitching that goes beyond simple stubbornness or perseverance. Tenacity in a pitcher means the ability to maintain the integrity of your approach under conditions that are actively trying to compromise it. It means staying committed to your game plan when the situation is creating pressure to abandon it. It means trusting your stuff, trusting your preparation, trusting the work you have done in the countless hours before the game when nobody was watching and nothing was at stake. Sasaki allowed 1 run across 5 innings in his first appearance. That sentence is clean and simple and tells you something important. But the legend's thorough analysis went deeper than the single run and the 5 innings. It went into the specific moments within those innings that revealed who Roki Sasaki actually is as a pitcher at this level. There were base runners. There were full counts. There were situations where a less mentally prepared pitcher might have tightened, might have tried to be too precise and lost the strike zone, might have overreacted to the circumstances and made the game bigger in his own mind than it actually needed to be. Sasaki did none of those things. He pitched. Inning by inning. Batter by batter. Pitch by pitch. With the kind of focused calm that you either have in competitive moments or you don't, and that no amount of coaching can fully install in a pitcher who does not already carry it naturally. The legend recognized it immediately. Because he had seen it before. In himself. In the handful of truly elite pitchers he had competed against and alongside throughout his own career. It is the rarest quality in pitching. Not the fastest fastball. Not the most devastating breaking ball. The ability to be exactly who you are in the moments when the pressure is highest. Roki Sasaki was exactly himself. A thorough analysis from a legend does not stop at the overall impression. It gets specific. It identifies the moments within the performance that prove the larger point. It connects the individual pitch to the broader truth about what kind of pitcher is standing on the mound. The legend pointed to Sasaki's use of his fastball in high-leverage counts as the most revealing aspect of the 5 innings. Sasaki's fastball is not simply a velocity pitch. This is something that analysts who focus primarily on radar gun reading sometimes miss about how he operates. Yes, the velocity is elite. Yes, the movement creates problems for hitters who are timing up against a traditional 4-seam approach. But the more sophisticated element of how Sasaki uses his fastball is the sequencing, the way he sets it up with his other pitches, the way he creates the right count to deploy it in, the way he understands that a pitch is most effective not just because of its quality in isolation but because of what came before it. In his first appearance, in the moments when the game was tightest and the temptation to overthrow would have been strongest, Sasaki threw his fastball with command. Not just velocity. Command. Location. Purpose. The legend described this as the most important data point from the entire performance. Not the final line. Not the strikeout total. The fact that when the game demanded his best fastball in his best location at the highest stakes of his American career, he delivered it. That is not something that shows up clearly in a spring training game. That is something that only reveals itself when the context is real and the consequences are genuine. The thorough analysis that made its way through the baseball world in the hours and days after Sasaki's first appearance was not simply a review of what had already happened. The legend used the 5 innings as a foundation for a projection. A statement about what Roki Sasaki will be throughout the course of the 2025 season, built on the specific evidence of how he performed when the stakes were real for the first time. The projection was not cautious. It was not hedged. It was not filled with the careful conditional language of someone protecting their own analytical reputation against the possibility of being wrong. It was direct. Roki Sasaki, the legend stated, will be one of the most important starting pitchers in the National League this season. Not one of the most interesting stories. Not one of the most promising young arms. One of the most important pitchers. A rotation anchor. A genuine ace-caliber presence who gives a championship-contending team exactly the kind of reliable, high-quality starting pitching that determines whether deep playoff runs are possible. The basis for this projection was not the spring training numbers, which the legend explicitly set aside as insufficient evidence. The basis was the mental and physical profile revealed in 5 innings against real competition at the highest level. A pitcher who commands his fastball in high-pressure counts. A pitcher whose approach does not change when runners are on base. A pitcher who trusts his preparation enough to stay in his game plan when the situation is creating noise around him. That pitcher, the legend said, is not a question mark. That pitcher is an answer. The baseball media's relationship with spring training statistics is complicated. On one level, everyone understands the limitations. Smart analysts consistently remind their audiences that spring training numbers are small samples produced in low-stakes environments and should be interpreted with significant caution. The disclaimers are written into almost every spring training evaluation piece as a matter of professional habit. And then, almost without exception, the evaluations proceed to treat the spring training numbers as meaningful evidence about what a player will do when the real games begin. Roki Sasaki's spring training appearances produced evaluations that leaned toward caution. The command questions were real. The adjustment period concerns were legitimate. No serious analyst was fabricating concerns out of thin air. But the legend's thorough analysis after the first regular season appearance made a different argument. Spring training tells you what a pitcher is working on. Regular season tells you what a pitcher is. Sasaki's spring training told you he was working on his command in a new environment against a new level of competition with a new set of adjustments to make. Every single one of those challenges is real and legitimate and worthy of monitoring. His first regular season appearance told you something more fundamental. It told you that under real pressure, in a real game, with real consequences, he is exactly the pitcher his career in Japan suggested he would be. Tenacious. Controlled. Intelligent. Capable of delivering his best stuff in his most important moments. That is the evaluation that matters. And the legend saw it clearly. There is a pattern in how American baseball receives international pitching talent that is worth examining. The pattern involves a period of skepticism, not malicious, but genuine, during which the talent is measured against American standards, evaluated in American environments, and judged by American analysts against the backdrop of American baseball's specific physical and tactical demands. This period of skepticism exists for understandable reasons. The transition from the Japanese leagues to Major League Baseball is genuinely difficult. It has humbled pitchers who were dominant in Japan and arrived in America to discover that the gap between the two levels was wider than their statistics suggested. But the pattern also has a consistent second chapter. The truly elite pitchers, the ones who were not simply very good in Japan but genuinely exceptional, possessing qualities that translate across any environment, reveal themselves quickly once the real games begin. Not in the spring training performances. In the first regular season moments when the game is real and the competition is prepared and the margin for error has disappeared. Roki Sasaki's first appearance was his entry into that second chapter. 1 run. 5 innings. A tenacious performance that completely disregarded the cautious evaluations and replaced them with something more reliable. Evidence. The legend's thorough analysis ended not with a verdict but with a direction. Watch how Sasaki responds the next time he faces adversity in a start. Watch how he adjusts when opposing teams begin to accumulate data on his tendencies. Watch how his command holds up not just in a single impressive appearance but across the full length of a season that will test every physical and mental resource he has. Those are the real questions. Not whether he belongs at this level, the first appearance answered that, but how high his ceiling actually is and how consistently he can reach it across 162 games and into October. The legend's answer, based on 5 innings and 30 years of watching the sport at its highest level, was quietly confident. The spring training evaluations were looking at a pitcher adjusting. The first regular season appearance revealed a pitcher arriving. There is a difference. And the legend saw it before anyone else did.